We're all seeking to survive
Right.
the environments that we're placed in. Yeah. So we're going to do what we need to survive those environments. So if you think about if you're in a really hectic environment and you're constantly living on trying to get through and survive that environment, trying to get through that day, then actually your life just becomes every day I'm getting up, trying to survive, trying to get through this.
Has anyone ever asked if it just gets overwhelming to constantly listen to people's biggest problems in their lives?
Yeah. I think that's one of maybe the key questions that I get asked when I tell people I'm a therapist or counselor. How do you manage hearing all that stuff? And when we work in health settings, often, people will be referred into the service, and our co-workers will see people leaving our therapy sessions, gathering themselves, they're distressed and everything. I think that happens like 4 or 5 times a day. How do you deal with that? Yeah, so it is one of the questions that we get asked a lot. And yeah, I've learned over the years how to deal with it.
Takes a lot of experience, I imagine.
It does.
It's hard to describe and quantify, and it's hard to know what it means to the other person because you're not dealing with numbers, you're dealing with emotions, and you're dealing with long-term emotions.
Yeah.
And someone could leave their time with Ian as their counselor or therapist and say, this truly changed my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for that, I think your work is empowering, to say the least.
Yeah.
But you empower other people to do that. That's the beauty of therapy or counseling, is you're trained in a way to let the person find the answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think definitely with the counseling model that I use, person-centered therapy, and that it's not that it doesn't have a directive element to it. I think it does. I do feel it's really important that the client feels that they are resolving their problem and I'm not fixing them. So they're not coming in to be fixed by me as a therapist.
Okay. So before we go on anymore, firstly, welcome to the podcast.
Okay.
Ian, pleasure to have you. I thought about having you on the podcast many, many months ago. Okay. I'm glad that we have now got here and you made it very easy for us. Okay. So I appreciate that. But just going back onto what you said about making sure that the client finds their own answers, why is that specifically?
Okay, so I think the importance of that is that if the client feels that they're resolving their own issues, then they're more likely to be able to do that without a session.
Right.
If the client feels that they're coming and they're getting their help from the therapist is sort of giving them the tools and showing them how to do it, the likelihood is that they'll keep coming back every time they have a problem, every time they have an issue. So the nature of therapy for me is to enable the client to find a space to feel, I'm doing this myself. Ian is just supporting and providing that space to do it. So hopefully that will leave them feeling, actually, I resolved my issues. It was just Ian gave me the acceptance to do that.
That's interesting. So it's never a long-term solution then. You're saying as a professional that therapy cannot be a long-term thing that how am I wording this? Wait. It has to be somewhat a short-term fix.
So if you're thinking about the experience.
Yes.
The experience is going to be always a short term. So the nature of coming into a therapy space is that I know that this relationship is going to end, like every other relationship is going to end. The period of time for me really is dependent on the client and the therapist as well. So the journey could be a year, could be 2 years, but then it could be 2 sessions. Client feels that they've got what they need. Therapist feels they've given what they need to the client to enable them to move on. I don't think the time frame for me is too important. It's what they receive when they're in that space.
But then that's different for everybody, isn't it?
That is.
Right.
That is different. We're all individuals. even with time limited therapy, which is what generally you would get with the NHS or any service that's provided by the government or funded by government funding, is that there needs to be a time frame what you work within. Often nowadays, between 8 and 12 sessions is generally what you would get if you were accessing a government funded service. That does mean that the therapist has to work in a more directed way. Even if you are very person-centered, there is an element of actually you're going to have to lead and direct the client to get to where they need. You do feel that you're having to use other therapeutic interventions in order to do that.
Okay. So not only is therapy vague to begin with because everybody has different issues and different ways of dealing with their issues, but more importantly, there's different types of therapy and even different settings in which you work in. So I know based on our conversations that you have worked in prisons, you have worked with families that could potentially be split apart by the government. And then there's your one-to-one therapy sessions where their family matters aren't directly the reason why they're here, but it could be the effect of why they're in that room.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to somewhat, I suppose for the listeners, to differentiate between those three types of roles, prisons, family, and one-to-one directly,
mm-hmm.
is there a way to actually define them?
I think what you're doing in the therapy space is very similar. It's just how you're doing it that possibly changes. So in my experience, you've talked about the therapies that I've used in the past, and I'll talk about them because I think it's covered by most other therapies as well. So for example, family-based therapy. The model that I used was multisystemic therapist. I was a multisystemic therapist working within a team that allowed, I guess, families to have an intervention because the child was at risk. So social care were involved, and they felt that actually the child would be better staying within the family home, but they just needed some support, therapeutic intervention. And we would be the therapist that would provide that support. So working with a family structure is then working primarily with the parent, but then moving that to working with the young person as well.
Is that more difficult because in situations like that, no one's directly asking for therapy. So to tell them they need it, does that make it more difficult?
Oh yeah. Yeah. With therapy, generally, if it's going to work best, there needs to be a yes by the person that's coming into the space. I need to realize that, I need this and I want this. And you're right, with social care, often the interventions that are offered to families are about social care sort of, I guess, leading on that. And the families, because they want to stay together in most cases, they are, I guess, agree to doing something that they wouldn't necessarily have chosen to do themselves. However, there does have to be a sense of, I want this. There's something that I want in this. And often if the parent is saying, I do want my child to stay at home, that's enough. They might not necessarily want the therapy, but actually if they want that child to be in their home and they want to build relationships with that child, that's good enough, I think.
But then in my head straight away, that brings on another challenge. The challenge being, okay, I'll do the therapy because that will make my child stay. But maybe they're missing the point. The therapy is about a long-term behavioral change.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so how do you then translate that to them? Because it's one thing to go to the appointment to make sure you don't lose your child.
Mm-hmm.
It's another to make sure you get something from it so you don't lose your child.
Mm-hmm.
So then how is that differentiated?
Okay, I would say, like all therapy, I feel 50% is about the relationship.
Okay.
So I would say the first thing I have to do is to build a relationship with that parent and say, look, I'm here to help you too. I'm here because I want to be here. I want to support you. So I tend to feel that if I can build a relationship that really is about their strengths, not necessarily their weaknesses, but to focus on the things that they're bringing right now in the moment and sort of validate that for them, then yeah, I think engaging an individual, whether it be in a multi-systemic therapy or, a one-to-one therapy like counseling, I think it is possible if you can build a relationship with them that is really based on trust. They trust you, and you trust that they're going to commit to the therapeutic intervention.
Yeah, and I don't think it's easy for anybody, because if you think about it, in order to be honest in a therapy session, one must genuinely open up completely. And that might be to a level that they've never even done with anybody else. Yeah. And now they're in a one-to-one session with essentially a professional but a stranger. And that's intimidating. That's very intimidating. But do you think that as the trust builds, the walls go down?
Yeah.
That might be an obvious question, but I suppose you can answer that in more detail, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think the power of therapy is that the person that you're going into therapy with, you will not know. So they're not part of your life. They can make no judgments about your life. And the judgments that come are based on what you're going to tell them. I think that's the key element of any therapeutic intervention, is that you don't know the person. If you can't do this to a friend. I was often told by my friends, "Oh, you'd make a good therapist," even before I was one. And that was generally because I guess they felt that I was a good listener and that they felt they were heard. And that was actually the reason I thought about it, because people would tell me, "Oh, you're a good listener. You're a good," and then I started to look into it, and I actually started to enjoy the process of listening to people. Actually, I had to obviously use lots of different skills that I didn't think I actually was using with my friends, but I wouldn't now ever feel that I could go and be a therapist to a friend or someone I knew, because there's an emotional connection. So everything that they possibly will tell me will relate in some ways to me and their relationship. So it would be hard to be purely therapeutic.
Right.
With someone that you know, because you're emotionally connected to them.
You have biases.
Yes. Yeah.
And you might listen to the story and be like, "I knew that person was no good for you."
Yeah. You've seen everything and you feel that you know everything. That you're not coming from an empty place. And that can sometimes, it can appear in therapy as well. Even when you don't know someone, they can remind you of somebody, and that you then have to deal with that as a therapist. Actually, let me move away from that.
I think your job is very hard because you somewhat have to find a way over time to learn to disconnect yourself from the stories you hear, the people that you might be sat with in the same room, and you might love to have them as a friend. You might love to be able to help them directly. How often do you ever just get the urge to, I know it's wrong to assume you have the answer, but do you ever get the urge to give them the answer? Does your heart go out to them? And
yeah, that happens all the time. When you're a therapist, stories sound familiar to you. We've been here before. And just the process of learning about oneself is very similar. So there are times that, someone brings a situation and I feel, here's the answer to that. And the quick thing would be to do, right, this is what you need to do. But no, you wait. Allow the client to find the answer. So it's knowing how to hold back sometimes as a therapist as well, and let them find the answer.
Yes.
It's always going to be better if they find the solution, or they feel they have found the solution.
But is that also because as humans, many of us go through very similar struggles?
Yeah.
Is there maybe one or two things that are very consistent in therapy? Types of problems, if you know what I mean?
So I would say, and I think therapy, whatever the model, is based on, as human beings, we learn to become pleasers of our environment rather than understanding ourselves. So just as a child growing up, you learn how to please the environment in order to possibly get what you want or your desire. So what happens as we get older is that we then become more focused on what's out there rather than what's internal. what I think my job as a therapist is actually to get you to start thinking about what's going on internally for you and listen to that internal voice, because that really tells you what is missing for you, what you need to do. So yeah, I think that is key to any therapy. Is the problem is you're more focused on the things externally rather than internally.
Is that to say then that the behaviors that we develop as children in order to, like you said, get what we want, to appease the people around us, especially maybe if someone grew up in a quite a chaotic environment, the things they had to do to keep their parents happy, their siblings happy. So is it correct to assume that there is a reoccurring pattern of people, or a lot of them, maybe even more than half, their problem being that they haven't dealt with their development, their history, growing up, if that makes sense?
Yeah. We're all seeking to survive the environments that we're placed in. Yeah. So we're going to do what we need to survive those environments. So if you think about, if you're in a really hectic environment and you're constantly living on trying to get through and survive that environment, trying to get through that day, then actually your life just becomes every day I'm getting up, trying to survive, trying to get through this. And that then becomes your pattern. And the likelihood is when you come into a therapy session, you're going to be really thinking about all the things that everybody else wants of you. And that's where your focus is. So my, I guess, sense is, as a therapist, I want you to try and get back to what you want, what's going on for you.
Which is easier said than done, because if you start therapy at 25, which is probably considered actually early, young people don't always go for therapy, but for the sake of argument, you start therapy at 25. You spent 25 years appeasing people around you, and the goal is within a 18-week time frame, maybe less. Somehow we have to get you out of that. Why does that sound like an impossible task?
Ugh. At 25, that sounds great, as you said. Can you the fact that you're taking people into a therapeutic space who are in their 50s and 60s and have never been in a therapeutic space before, so then that becomes even more difficult if there is an issue that they've been doing for the last 40 years. How do you change that poor behavior when you've been doing it for so long? So yeah, I think the longer you leave counseling or therapy, when you feel that actually it would be helpful, the longer you leave it, I think the harder it is to come into the space and make the changes that are needed often. Not always, but often.
Yeah, it's very challenging indeed. So, if there was an average age group, from your experience, what is the average age group of people who come into your work, into your office?
I would say the average would be generally in their 30s, generally female. Females access therapy. If I was even to look at cultural diversity, I would say white females are more open to coming into the therapeutic space, here in the UK at least.
So I have some stats for that, actually.
Okay.
Now, 1 in 4 people in England will experience a mental health problem at some point during the year. But within these stats, 19% are often women and 12% are men that report mental health problems or symptoms of anxiety or depression. So men, as we all hear the stigmas all the time, men are told to not cry, to not express themselves, to always be strong. But now, in an environment, in a society like ours, that's really we're starting to see the effects of that on those men, and then their indirect effects on the women and the families that they have. So I know you said it is generally female, but are you also noticing an increase in males in the last 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely I'm seeing an increase in males accessing therapy. So I think in general, just males and their relationships are changing. I think males are talking more even to friends and people around them. So I do feel that we are seeing a shift in the amount of men that are coming into therapy, but also the amount of men who are willing to be a bit more vulnerable and talk about issues, even if it's not in a therapeutic space, with friends or with other people. Yeah, we're seeing an improvement in that.
I think that's definitely important, because another statistic that comes up is that, so in the year 2023, the amount of people that chose to take their own life numerically was reported at 6,069.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? 6,069 people felt like...
Yeah, the UK.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was better to not live. But drastically, even though we just gave statistics for women being more likely to report and go to therapy, and you said women are more likely to be in my sessions, but of that number plus 6,000, 75% aren't men who decide to end things. So it's drastically skewed. You know, you have on one hand, if you just look at the referrals and the people who attend these sessions, you'd think women, they have more emotional problems. And then you look at such an extreme act and it's 75% men. Wow, that's...
Yeah.
It's very skewed though, isn't it?
Yeah. And the thing is that in this country in particular, that's not necessarily being addressed. The fact that actually men are more likely to take their lives. So mental health services, government-funded mental health services, don't necessarily prioritize men or males, or encourage males to come into therapy. What we're seeing is actually they prioritize other groups. So I have, coming into being a therapist myself and wanting to provide therapy, one of my passions was I want to work with men, you know, and that's why I wanted to work within a men's prison in particular, because I knew that men were more able to access therapy and would feel free to doing that more so in a prison environment than any other environment.
I mean, it might be one of the only things that's good about their time in prison, if that makes sense. And because prison puts a halt on your life in many ways, there's no stigma to worry about. And stigma at that point doesn't even matter anymore. You're confined by cells. Who cares about social norms anymore?
And I think that's the key. What's one of the things that I realized when working in prison is that the isolation is what killed so many men.
Right.
Just being on their own. So memories were coming up that they couldn't, I guess, resolve with drink or with going out, violence, football matches, or whatever they would do to just sort of avoid that. So they were having to face a lot of these issues, and they would actually access therapeutic interventions. So coming to a therapist to talk through some of those things that were issues. So yeah, it was a rewarding period of my life working within the prison environment.
We're definitely going to touch on that a bit more, but just a minute ago you said the NHS is not necessarily targeting men. Who are they targeting then?
So the two primary groups that I know are those that have served in the armed forces.
Okay. And
mothers who have children under the age of 3, or parents actually who have children under the age of 2, I think it is. So young mothers. They are both of those groups, I would say, are priority groups.
Yeah.
That we do feel that there is an element of trauma and sometimes low mental health, depression, low mood that is highlighted within those two groups. But I don't think they're the only two groups. I actually would say that young men, 18 to maybe 30, are a higher priority because of suicide. Simply because of suicide.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not as we always say, it's not a competition of grief, but it's also hard to prioritize a certain group over the other. And in truth, you could make an argument for either of those groups, really, any of those groups. So I guess we have to encourage people to ask for the help, and then hopefully they do. But let's go back onto the prison work that you did. Aside from realizing that the stigma's not there and these people are being, loneliness is hurting them, as you said, what were the other main takeaways of working in a prison? Because again, stigma. People are in prison. They must be no good for society. You must have heard and seen things that, and you probably thought to yourself, you could do a lot of great things out there, but you're here. You know?
Yeah. I think one of the key elements of working in prison is about the release of the person who is in prison and what they then take away from the experience, the therapeutic experience they've had, to apply that to their lives outside prison. So for me, I was always feeling this sense of, I want to see, I guess, this individual be able to walk away from this therapeutic intervention and know that when they leave prison, that actually they could be a better human being. That was ultimately my goal. I think the great thing about the prisons that I worked in and the managers that I had is that they didn't necessarily have a time limit on therapy. They would allow you the space to be able to work with individuals for as long as they felt that was needed. So there was a lot more flexibility, I guess, within the therapeutic space within prison. But yeah, definitely I would say the fact that actually you've got the commitment of an individual who's going to turn up at sessions, and actually you could use those sessions to help promote a better vision of themselves, so that when they leave that space, that they could be better human beings. That was, I guess, ultimately my goal. Doesn't always happen, but it was definitely what I wanted to be able to achieve.
Yeah, I can't imagine it being easy at all, even if you do have more access to their time. But I suppose my question is, hopefully I'm not overstepping any boundaries, but were there any particular types of problems? Were there any correlations between the people that you were seeing in prison?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons I ended my work within prison is because I was being faced with very similar issues all the time. Often trauma, often abuse within childhood that was not necessarily recognized by social services, or someone that went to school ended up, possibly going throughout school without a social care intervention, but then they were being sort of regularly abused at home. So we had a lot of referrals like that, where children or young men in particular had a history of abuse that just wasn't really, I guess, identified by school or by social care, and then there was a sense of failure. They felt failed.
When you say young men, are you saying that the prison you worked in was for young men, or
it was a male prison, and they would talk about their,
not for juveniles? It was 18 and above.
Yeah.
So even sometimes in 40-year-old men, you would notice instantly that the experiences that they had in their early adolescence years,
that's what they would be bringing in.
Right.
That's what they would be bringing into the therapy session. Yeah. And this is why I said the isolation sometimes bring back memories that become really difficult to manage in a prison environment, because there's no escape. You can't, go out and do something to get rid of that, or do an activity when you want. You're left in a space on your own, and you're left with those thoughts. So yeah, they would be coming in to therapy sessions with memories of that trauma, memories that possibly felt stronger than they had ever felt before. So that was becoming a regular thing for me to sit down and sort of listen to.
I'm somewhat conflicted on this next point, because yes, they're in prison, they have all the time in the world to focus on themselves. But actually, I think you have to be very mentally strong in order to do that, because if we consider that you're in prison and now your chances within society are quite limited, there's a stigma to people who leave prison. And also, your thoughts, whoever you are, your thoughts eat you up. So if you're with your thoughts 24 hours a day, no real distraction, then therapy is probably more difficult to take in, right? Because if you're someone who has self-doubting thoughts, you might, as a therapist, say to someone outside of prison, maybe you want to enjoy some activities, meet some friends, go for a run, but you can't do that. If you're someone who's self-sabotaging, then you have 24 hours a day to self-sabotage yourself in a prison.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to assume that it's harder to have successful therapy sessions in prison, am I assuming right or wrong?
So where it concerns, I guess, the follow-up after therapy sessions, and I think that's what I'm hearing you talk about, is actually what can I do outside that therapeutic space that then helps me get into a better space? Definitely, I would say yes. What you can do within a prison environment is going to be limited to a certain extent. However, where it concerns with the therapeutic space, the coming into that space and exploring, I actually would say in prison, people come ready for therapy.
Oh, wow.
Like the first session, I'm just so amazed at how open, and it's almost like a pour out. In fact, before starting in a prison, I remember my manager saying, the one thing you're going to notice about prison work is that your first session is often going to be where they pour out everything. In community, that's very different. You've got to sort of build a relationship, become comfortable. In prison, that was so different. First sessions, I had to make sure I had tissues and things like that because I knew that people were going to come in and they were just going to pour out and be in a place of distress because they trust you. So it's actually the second and third session that's always the challenge. Getting them to come back when they've been that vulnerable, it can sometimes be challenging. Yeah, they would sometimes not turn up for the second session because they were so embarrassed. They were left with that embarrassment because they just opened up and, yeah, became vulnerable. They were so vulnerable. So the two differences is that, yes, there's a lot less that you can do outside the therapeutic session because they are limited and they have sort of times to do certain things. But actually in the session, I found that actually I got more, people were more open within that environment.
Yeah, I'm very surprised by that. I'm very pleasantly surprised by that. I guess it is a good thing. It's not what you expect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So is this something they can request in prisons, or is it a part of a program where people are sent to you?
Yeah, it's works very, very much like it works in the community. You go to your GP, the GP could recommend this as something that you want to do, and yeah, you would access it through choice rather than having to.
How often, so before these prison session starts, do you know what those people are in for, or is it a blank sheet?
Good question, yeah. We do have access to their information.
Okay.
It would really be down to the therapist on whether they were going to read all that information before going in. In my experience of working even within the community, it's your responsibility to read the information.
Right.
What you might get within the prison is what we call alerts. So there would be things that you have to know. So yeah, I have to know that this client has a group of people that they don't tend to work with, or they attacked a member of staff. And so you'd have all those sort of areas of information.
Is that racial, for example? Is that a racial thing?
It could be, yeah. So if there was a racial attack, or it was sexist statements, all that would be upfront, so you would know all those
right
as an emergency alert.
But not their crimes.
Their crimes you could look into. I could find that information out, but whether you would choose to do that or not is down to you. But yeah, if their crimes were generally a physical violence, that would come up as an alert anyhow for you as a therapist working within a prison environment. And
indulge with our listeners, just briefly describe the setting that you're sitting in with these people.
So it's actually a healthcare setting, just like any other healthcare setting in a community. Most prisons have a healthcare setting, very much like your GP setting. which you have GP access and mental health practitioners. You might even say that it works slightly better within prison because everybody has to work together. So we're all in the same building and so it's easy to get information and share information, I'm just across the corridor from their GP or the nurse. They're all working together. So you tend to find that sharing of information is much easier within the prison environment. And it's good that it is like that because of the nature of the environment as well.
Did you ever, I know earlier you alluded to the traumas were repetitive and you almost had to leave, but did you ever see any certain correlations between empathetic people and their crimes or ages? Were there ages where more people were more remorseful and wanted to go to therapy? Did you find that parents were more prisoners that were parents outside of prison more likely to do therapy? Did you ever see a pattern like that? Or was it random?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Because in general, no, I didn't. Possibly because I never really looked at it as a research sort of aspect. I was never really in that frame of mind when working within prison. I was more familiar with the issues that were being explored within the prison environment. And I think that was largely due to how it affected me. So when you're hearing a lot of child abuse all the time, you do feel, this is becoming a subject matter that I'm getting a lot of repeats and you're hearing it over and over again. And I think, as I said, that was one of the reasons I felt actually I really want to come out of this space because it's becoming quite familiar, the type of I guess stories that you're listening to. People's personal stories were very similar. So it did feel like I needed to move for that reason. Where it concerns the types of people, I would think there was a cross section of the types of people that would come to therapy.
Whenever I listen to professionals like yourself in person or on the internet, like a Dr. Gabor Mate, for example, I always hear a correlation between abusers and horrible childhoods. It could be drug abusers, could be child abusers, could be domestic violence abusers. There's always something that says that this person, in their mind, they had it ingrained in them that these behaviors were somewhat acceptable. It could be the child who at 25 rationalized the idea of it was okay that my parents beat me because they loved me and I was a bad child, right? And that could be as much as one slap to much more, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if the parents, for whatever reason, don't indulge the right mechanics and thought patterns into these children, they then carry that with them. And then when they deal with the rest of society, they have certain ways of thinking that actually, even though it's no fault of your own, this is not acceptable. And then we have to put them in jail. And so why is childhood, from a professional standpoint, why is childhood so important?
It's what we learn. I think, they said there was a saying, give me a child until they're 7 and you give me the man or the woman.
Wow.
And I would definitely say there's a lot of truth in that. We establish our learning in those fundamental years, those 0 to 7, we're really seeing ourselves, and it's the types of nurturing that we get within that space that will set us up for life moving forward. So I would definitely say that parenting is a key part of developing a child and then developing the man or woman in the future, or the person in the future. So definitely I would say it's key.
But then don't you always have those classic examples of, let's say, a family of 5, 3 kids, right? Same parents, all 3 of them go in different directions.
Yeah.
Now I know that, as a lot of people say, parents don't parent all the kids the same way. I get that, right? But still, that's a very controlled environment, let's say, for 18, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
How do people go in such drastically different ways?
Because I think you alluded to it just then, is that actually parents then parent in different ways. The expectation for an eldest child is going to be very different from the expectation of the youngest child. Yeah. There is this middle child syndrome that they talk about, because the middle child tends to get ignored. They're not the one that has to take all the responsibility, but they're not the one that has to be looked after all the time, or you're told, so you've got to look after that one. You've got to. So actually they sit in the middle and can sometimes get ignored because of that. And then that impacts how they see life and how they view life. So yeah, you're right. There's more than one child, and they're all presenting with different personalities as well. You're going to have to adapt your parenting to those children. And yeah, the task of parenting is that, there isn't a rule book to say how you do it, with one child. You really have to work at getting to know your child and knowing how best to parent that child. Mm-hmm.
Which in itself cannot be easy, because you're learning on the job as a parent.
You're learning on the job.
Yet.
Yeah. And then you got people you've got, society influences that, once upon a time it would have been acceptable to smack a child. Now, that's not acceptable in our society. So therefore, actually parents who have been smacked themselves, how do I do this differently without that, element of, so they're being influenced by society as well. So yeah, it's a challenge for parents. I do believe it is a challenge for parents, but I do feel they have the key role, as you were alluding to, in developing that child's environment so that they can then be a model citizen.
Yeah. Whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But wow, that must be difficult, to say the least. I think also as well, in a day and age like this, everyone has an opinion, and it's so annoying. Respectfully, I'm like, I'm someone who has a podcast, right? So I get it. It might sound a bit ironic, but everybody seems to have an opinion. So with being pulled in like 10 million different directions on how to do this, how to do that, how to make money, how to raise your kids, there are more resources, but actually it's like a table full of 10 meals. You don't even know where to begin. And at the end, you enjoy none of them. Do you know what I mean? Like at buffet, people usually fill up their plate before they get to the end. And
access to information, is a beautiful thing on a whole. Yeah. But then it can be also so overloading,
right?
Especially for parents, because there's so many things that you could argue for and then argue against. Do you know what I mean? So it still leaves you with the sense of, I have to make the decision of what is best for my child. So yeah, it is a challenging role, but I do think a key one to creating the adult.
If we just stay on the topic of children for a bit, the statistics are not good. 1 in 5 children and young people in England have a mental health problem, right? And this is an increase, because the number used to be lower. It used to be... So, before I tell you what the number used to be, why do you think, just from a professional standpoint, and I get it, none of us really have the answers, but why are young people suffering more now than they did 10 years ago?
I think it may well link to what we were talking about before. What we just finished talking about is access to information. It's easier for children to be exposed to things. And then it becomes very, very difficult for them to function in a world when they've been given maybe more information than they need on some subject matters. So I think, that's the thing that's, I think, making it very, very different. And the fact that they have access to that information, they can control that information as well, share that information.
Too many paths, almost too many paths to go down and not sure where to go, so often feel a bit lost. Because the stats, as we said, it was 1 in 5. Only back in 2017, it was 1 in 9. That's quite a bit of an increase. And when we say young people, we are talking about 15, 16-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, actually, once we get to the age of 17 to 25, 31% of these young people saying that they have mental health issues are actually women, girls, young girls, compared to 13% of boys.
Right.
So, I don't even know where to begin. Because from 17 to 25, could it be the social pressures that are on women? Could it be the stigmas that are on them?
So if you think about it, all those pressures have been around for many years, longer than social media. So those pressures were there before, but the intensity of those pressures are a lot more now.
Right.
So, I guess 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, the access to images of women that were considered the perfect would be much rarer, because you'd have to just sit in front of a TV in order to get that.
If you had a TV.
If you had a TV, exactly. And so being bombarded by that, as much as it was there, you weren't seeing it every 30 seconds. Or it was, you could connect with your family, and actually you could be influenced by other people around you in a much better way, and hear a contradiction to those negative messages because you're communicating with people. With social media today, and then the way that it works as well, is that we are now seeing images regularly about how someone should be the perfect person or this, and creating those images. So for me, that is what young people are exposed to, is these images that then say that this is how you should be or how you should be living.
I might get in trouble for this comment, but I'll keep it balanced. I'm seeing a lot of men that act the same way. However, listen to my words, I'm seeing a lot of women that look the same. I don't know if you've realized, like I have, a lot of cosmetic enhancements have shot up across the board. They've become massive businesses. Everyone's getting them regardless of the age. So actually, indirectly, because people are starting to look the same as well, because they are all trying to achieve this image that, you say exists. And I think the difference, I wasn't around 30 years ago. Well, I was, but I was just born. I think the difference is that growing up around a certain group of people, or 100, 200 people until you leave for another city, right? You saw everybody in their true form. And now, before you even step outside your house to consider living on your own, you've had hundreds of people scream opinions at you about why you're good looking or you're not good looking, or why you wouldn't make a good partner or a good wife or a good husband. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how we actually gain control of this, because to me personally, I think it's gotten out of hand. Growing up and coming out of high school, we had Facebook, and then college, we had Instagram and Snapchat, right? Now, kids have that from like the age of 8. So all of those existing stigmas that are on these social media sites are at the hands of a child. Surely someone out there has got to be taking some accountability, right? So answer it from a personal standpoint. Let me know what you think. But then if you would want to touch on it, should there not be more regulatory control? Why is it so easy to make these accounts that we know mess with the minds of young people?
So one of my previous roles was working with parents as a parenting practitioner, and sort of helping and supporting them with what we were doing, sort of what we would say was good parenting, positive parenting. And I guess to sort of address that issue, often we were told to sort of encourage parents to put blocks on phones to protect their children with different ways of managing those things. And research was showing that actually that isn't necessarily the best way to do it. That actually it's better to remove the blocks and to teach your young person what the damage could be of exposing yourself to information that was going to be really helpful. And also being examples of that in yourself as an adult, managing what you access. So you're teaching them that there are certain things that we just don't look at, because if we look at that too much, it's going to be very, very damaging, and really teaching them how to filter information, to remove the access to too much violence and things like that, or too much sexual content, just helping them to navigate and have those conversations with them, and start those conversations as early as possible, especially if your young person was showing a knowledge and interest of that. And I would definitely say that it's not so much about trying to control and stop information from getting to your child. It's really about actually putting the power within their hands to be able to manage it, and showing and educating them about the damage of that. That seemed to work much better overall than sort of hiding information away from them or trying to protect them through security aspects.
It's strange though, although I agree with you that blocks don't work. Children can be a bit naturally rebellious. I was a bit naturally rebellious. I don't like being told what to do even at this age, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that if things like blocks were around for me when I was 15, I probably would have just found a way to bypass them anyway. Or me and my friends would find ways and get creative, as kids usually are. Mm-hmm. But the problem I have with this idea of trying to make the child understand is that these are the same kids at that age who go to high school, for example, and have to ask the teacher before they even go to a bathroom break. And yet we're expecting a level of maturity from them that adults in society don't even have. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very unfair way to almost say to children, oh, you should understand. Now, again, I'm not for these issues, of course, and it is harming young men and women out there, right?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for you, and I do believe there's an overexposure. I just don't know if allowing them or trying to get them to understand is the right way. Aren't they too young to understand? Are they not too young?
Okay, so when I'm saying helping them to understand, is that you need to be able to understand your child and their level of development, what you should expose them to and what you shouldn't, So I would really definitely say it is about teaching, I wouldn't tell anybody not to give their children ice cream or chocolate. I wouldn't even though I know that that's not necessarily going to be a healthy diet for them. If they start craving these things, it's going to be even more difficult for them. I wouldn't say stop doing that. I would say actually show them how to do balance. Why don't you just show them how to do it after having a healthy meal? That you have this amount when you've had a healthy meal, not doing it, not having that before. So it's really about educating a child and bringing that into their awareness. And you can do that from such an early age. If you think about how we manage food and diet, that's something that they have to have from a very early age. We start to train them to eat healthily foods, and possibly the sweeter things are generally after you've had a healthy meal, and it's usually balanced alongside a good diet long term. So I would say the same with how they access information online.
I think also it has to be a huge societal push, because if we believe that certain things are wrong, then those same messages, they need to be pushed in school. Mm-hmm. Because for a lot of children, high school is actually their primary source of socialization. Mm-hmm. Parents are busy, parents drop off in the morning, parents are tired, parents might have younger children to look after. So whatever this answer is, it needs to be pushed in a societal manner.
Yes,
and what we tend to have, again, through social media is people just constantly bickering at each other with no real answer for anything, just they're wrong and they're wrong. And I'm noticing a lot of that as well, actually. And people often tend to blame social media for whatever issues there might be, right? But I remember just a month ago when Hila Yoon was sat here talking about a different problem. She said, in a similar context, social media, the individual needs to take some responsibility. But I just don't think the young person is an individual. I think even myself, I don't think I was an adult until I was 25. I know legally I was an adult at 18, but there's a difference between being able to buy something in a shop and actually being an adult. So that's why, like, my heart goes out to these children. Like, they're being in so many different directions. And, you know, we all saw the Adolescence Netflix series, right? And we all know there's truth to it. But then you can't help but to feel sorry for the girl in that story. And then it's to somewhat also the young boy, you know.
And the entire family, if you're thinking about that.
Yes, yeah.
The nature of, I think that was what was so powerful about that drama was that often you didn't see it from, I guess, the perpetrators' point of view. You would often see things from victims' point of view, how it impacts a family when, you know, a child dies. So we would have been seeing the drama from the girl's point of view and her family, but seeing it from the perpetrators and them having a family that was an everyday family, just going out working, trying to do their best. And then you see something like this happen because of the influences outside that family that were going on that the family weren't even aware of. So for me, that really pulls home that same point. Actually, there's so many demands for us as parents or as adults with the work that we do. Cost of living. So we're working longer hours. We're not spending as much time with our children. We're actually allowing them to access, you know, things that they wouldn't access if we were in the house and around them a bit more. But we're leaving them to, activities outside that sort of the norm. So therefore, we're seeing the cost of that. We're seeing that actually they're being influenced by people online that we don't even know. Not even somebody that we've introduced them to, or we've sort of taken them into the school environment, and we will get to know those individuals and make judgments of them themselves. They can get to know people through just having a phone. Somebody else can come into their life that influences them that you know nothing about. Yeah, that's new. That's a new issue that we're dealing with.
It is quite new.
I don't think it's for me to be fearful of that or scared of that. It's that actually, what can I do to ensure the safety of the child that's in my care? You were talking about it just not being a parent issue. I think you're right. I don't believe it's just parents that bring children up. Societies bring children up. And I think that we've lost that in many ways. We've lost that ability for us collectively come together and do what's best for children. Children are getting lots of different messages at school, in the school environment that they're getting at home, and we need to collectively together because young people need to be taught by their societies, everyone in their societies.
Yeah, you know, it takes more than two parents to raise a child.
It takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah. Just to stay on the points of children briefly before we move on to what I really want to discuss is addiction. The statistics tell us that children who come from financially challenged backgrounds are actually more likely to suffer from mental health issues. I think, let me put it this way. Children or young people whose families face financial difficulty had higher rates of mental health difficulties. 27% of 18 to 16-year-olds who come from financially challenged backgrounds reported mental health issues, to 10% of 18 to 16-year-olds whose families could afford finances, again, and you just said cost of living. Cost of living, finances. What we're seeing is that, you know, the richer you are, is the better outcomes are for... In a society like this, definitely.
So, you know, you're living in a better quality of area where you can access sports and activities, things outside, nature, even just
things are safer as well in many ways. I grew up in my side, and I remember like when I come from a single parent background, although my dad was always very heavily involved. But because it was just me and my mum, and there was no one to look out for me or take me. For example, when I wanted to go and play football at Chorlton Park or Fletcher Moss, my mum instantly said, never. It gets dark late, it's dangerous out there, people have knives.
So that reduces the ability for you to be able to engage with your community, engage with activities. And then you're, at home looking for other things to do, within that home. And then feeling sort of possibly, angry and upset because you can't do the things that you want to do. So, live in a house where there's more financial ability to provide, then you're going to see a reduction in, for me, the negative behaviors that we see sort of inner city communities.
The current state of the UK is horrible, as we know. We just spent the last 20-30 minutes focusing on children development. But it's now getting even harder to take care of those children because the adults are now financially stressed. The adults find it difficult to be the adults in the room. The statistics I got, actually, I should have said this earlier. All the statistics that I got for today's podcast are from the Big Mental Health Report 2024, so they are quite recent. Okay, good. And the one I'm going to read out now is that 60% of people said that cost of living is affecting their mental health. 82% of people that are experiencing homelessness have a mental health problem, and that's up from 45% in 2014. 1 in 4 claims for PIP, personal independence payments, are now because of anxiety and depression, which is up from 1 in 6 in 2015. 9 in 10 adults in the UK have experienced high to extreme levels of stress at various times. The truth is, the relationship between poverty and mental health is cyclical. And that was actually an actual statement in this report. So if the relationship between poverty and mental health is cyclical, and more people are going into financial disparity, we're going to be facing problems for quite a few decades to come, aren't we? Not necessarily financially, but the ramifications of these few years on the mental health of these people. Do you know what I mean? Because if being financially challenged challenges your mental health, then by having mental health issues, you are less likely to get out of poverty because you need to go gain skills, work longer hours to get out of the poverty, but you can't because now you're mentally shut down. So it becomes a hole that we're in. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I definitely would say those statistics are possibly statistics that would be very familiar in lots of different countries. And I don't necessarily think that if we were looking at poverty worldwide, that we would get the same impact in the sense of on mental health in particular. Because if you are living in an environment where, there is a lot of poverty, the majority of people you come across who are suffering poverty, it doesn't become mentally as big an issue because it's familiar to you, the environment that you're living within, and you learn the resources to manage that. I definitely feel depending on where you're doing the research, and countries where you have, I guess, a vast amount of wealth alongside poverty in a very small particular area, then we're going to see these statistics. So definitely I would agree with that in the sense of, it's definitely going to relate to.
It's relative poverty, isn't it? I think that's the term. In any city or country where there's more relative poverty, there's always also higher crime. Whereas what you're touching on is, if that country is more simple to begin with, less wealth, more focused on necessities and family, those mental health statistics could be completely the other way around. And someone from England could look at that and say, wait, hold on. Why are you all happy? Do you know what I mean? Exactly. Or like, why don't you want this and you want that? So again, as a society, we teach people how to do things. I do think that's a lot of positivity in what you said, and it is a brilliant point. However, I would also argue that just because a nation has a more simple lifestyle, it might not always make it more happy mentally. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Because I think what I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't necessarily measure their happiness or their joy in general in life. So I definitely, but how they manage, I guess, disaster or sorrow or loss, actually, it might well help that process.
Well, it's through community, isn't it? The vast majority of countries outside the West, I'm Middle Eastern, right? I know we have more societal bonds. Now, that's changing through influx of capitalism as well. But if you think about it on a traditional standpoint, well, how do people deal with grief? Through community. What did you say was ruining people in prisons? Loneliness. What does capitalism indirectly create? Loneliness. Because people get involved in this, often described as a rat race, and working 5-6 days a week, 9 to 5, 9 to 7. Just to make a living. So I suppose what we're saying is that there are many different ways to manage mental health or to be causes of bad mental health, if that makes sense. But you are right. Have you ever visited a country where you thought life here is much more simple? Give me one example.
Caribbean. I go to the island of St. Kitts, which is, as a family, we have a house out there. So I visit there. Generally the Caribbean. But I was in Barbados earlier this year. So I do go out to the Caribbean, and I think if there's any place that tells me that,
capitalism is evolving.
Because you see people just living lives in a completely different way, and not depressed. They're not depressed, but yet you would feel that, well, maybe you should be depressed because you don't seem to have very much, but they don't. They're down at the beach, swimming in the water every morning and it's just, I think to myself, actually, some of this
maybe we have it the wrong way around.
Their countries are, they're not wealthy countries. They're, they don't get.
But actually, so again, that same comment could be made about where I'm from, right? But in the long term, if you were to settle down there, don't you think you would actually start noticing some of those issues that the wealth disparity creates? Don't you think those nations, again, I could be wrong here, so I'm offering it to you as a question. Is there limited opportunity for the average person there? Is there more opportunity in the UK?
Yes, definitely. But what I was focused on was not so much the opportunity, but how they manage the lack. What we would consider the lack of opportunity. Because I was seeing lack of opportunity, but yet I was seeing people eat well,
sunlight.
I was seeing people, go down to the beach and swim, and whatever they were doing, they were just doing things. What I know is good for your mental health. Definitely, I think all these things are good for your mental health. Because of it, obviously, the weather is, I guess, better. The sunshine is shining a lot more. But there was just this sense of, actually, why do we have such major mental health issues in the UK when I'm going to the Caribbean and I'm seeing levels of poverty that is not causing the same levels of mental health that I see. It's not that there isn't problems there. Of course there are.
Of course there are, yeah.
But the levels that we're sort of evidencing in this country, I don't really know what the statistics are in the Caribbean, across the Caribbean, but just by being there and looking, I could see.
Do you know what I think one of the biggest problems are with this country? Is that you might statistically not be in poverty, but you can feel like you're in poverty. And the biggest reason for that, as I've said many times, is this credit system that society has put us into, where in order to have this roof over my head, I am on a long-term contract. In order to be able to make ends meet, I have this card that will charge me a certain amount if I pay it back. And what this society and many other societies in the West have done is they have created generations of people who are accepting this. Oh, it's okay if your job doesn't pay you well. We'll just find a way to elongate your loan. Instead of the people at the top looking out for the average person and saying, hold on, surely it's wrong for someone to pay for their home for 30, 40 years. And then the final sum being twice as much as what they were actually asked for. Do you know what I mean? If your mortgage is 200k, it could easily be 400 by the end of the term. And they've somehow convinced all of us that this is acceptable, while salaries have remained stagnant. And every time things have remained stagnant, banks have taken advantage and said, here's credit, here's credit, here's credit. My point being, you could be earning 30 grand here and feeling like you're in poverty. Whereas in countries or in places like the Caribbean, people on that type of money probably wouldn't feel poor. They might not feel rich, but do you know, are you following what I'm saying? Yeah.
Because we're talking about how it then impacts your mental health, because that's the way they feel, then they actually don't have the mental health issues that we have, because we feel we're not rich. We feel that we haven't got enough. We feel that we have to keep going to work and doing the things that we're doing because we need that.
People like to think that their efforts mean something, right? So people go to the gym 6 months, they see a difference, they get hooked and they love it. The problem is, in this current capitalistic market, and I'm not saying I have an answer, right? But in this current state of affairs in this city, in this country, people don't feel like even years their efforts mean something. And I think that's the biggest problem, because if you're pushing for something, one of the ways you maintain your momentum is by knowing how far you've gone. So if you feel like you're in quicksand or quick mud, it's probably the opposite in the Caribbean, because I feel like if someone had money for a home, they probably just build it. Do you know what I mean? Instead of going for a long-term loan or anything as such. But yeah.
So things like housing it's just completely different there. You know, you inherit the house generally that you're living. So from someone else, from a member of the family. So yeah, there is this sense of, it's just different. It's just very, very different. So therefore, how it impacts our mental health is different, which is, I guess, the key point that I'm trying to make.
And a very good point made indeed. Okay. Now let's go into addiction, because you said something very interesting. You said there was a difference between addiction and habit. And for those who haven't heard you speak before today, explain that for us.
So there are things that I feel are sort of bad habits that we have, which are very similar to addictive behaviors, but I don't think they're where it concerns addictive behaviors. I feel an addictive behavior could have started as a habit, and then you become enslaved to that behavior. So you feel you can't function without that thing. And it could be a substance, but it could also be work. It could be an activity. It could be sex. It could be, there's a craving for that becomes unmanageable for you. So you're not able to function without doing that thing, or so that's when it becomes an addiction. I think that sometimes we can have habits that are not necessarily healthy, but we do, but they're not necessarily controlling us. So I currently have a habit of, at the end of my day, I'll go home, I'll put the TV on, and I will lay down watching a TV program and often fall asleep just watching that, and have a good few hours maybe rest. If I was to go and sit at my computer, I just would not fall asleep. The interaction is very, very different. So that's a habit that I've got myself into, is that actually after a long day, I just want to just chill out. The best way for me to do it is just to put the TV on, lie down on a sofa, and I will just chill, relax, and fall into a sleep. So I would say that's a habit at the moment. Yeah. But if that became something that I had to do every day, And actually I was finding that it was impacting my going to work and functioning and things like that. And that then became something that I was doing in order to function. Then I would say that it becomes a habit, an addiction rather, an addictive behavior. So addictive behaviors for me, and I'm sharing my opinion because I know there's lots of views on this, is something that's taken over your life, and you are living your life for it.
Or you will put everything aside for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, if you need to go and get a smoke, you'll find every excuse to do that.
To do it, yeah.
Yeah.
Your body is craving it.
Right.
You can't function.
And that's a chemical thing, isn't it? Because nicotine is naturally produced in the body.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start having 5 cigarettes a day,
Mm-hmm.
your body stops producing nicotine because now it's getting it in another way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the medical addiction we're referring to, because once your body shuts down the nicotine factory, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
you now need to make sure you're maintaining your 5-10 cigarettes a day
Mm-hmm.
to maintain the same amount of
Mm-hmm.
nicotine.
Yeah.
But then there are habits. As we've said, sleeping every day in front of your TV can't be considered a medical addiction,
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing in Ian that causes him to relapse if he doesn't do that for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Because you probably don't do that on holiday, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't relapse
Mm-hmm.
and you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas quitting smoking could be detrimental to you, actually, in the short run,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way you relapse, cold sweats,
Mm-hmm.
shaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose in some ways then that's the difference between an addiction, a medical addiction, and a habit.
Okay. I would sort of align with that, I guess.
I mean, it goes deeper.
Yeah. Because I would say where it concerns, because the body is having a chemical reaction as such, as what you were talking about, then the physical element of that chemical reaction is what we're measuring as how you're managing that addiction. So what if the addiction doesn't necessarily have a physical symptom, but it could possibly have a mental? Yeah. So it's not necessarily shown in your physical body, but mentally, what we're seeing is that actually there's a craving for something.
Like people who go gym every day.
Yes. So mentally, I need to be there. I need to have done 6 hours in the gym because I need this, because I want this. I want my body to look like this. So therefore there's a craving. You're seeing images of, and it's never getting there. So even though you've got the 6-pack and you've got everything else, that everything's going on for you, but you're still going back because you want to now maintain it, or it needs to look better. That's all mental. Or mental, you're not seeing yourself in the way that you want to, and that becomes mental. So nobody could be able to do tests on you or physically say that there's anything wrong with that particular, but it works in the same way. What we're finding with, I feel, mental health is that it's so often linked to physical health issues. It ends up creating physical health issues. Often I will say to clients, when you're feeling that worry, where do you feel it? And I say, I feel it in my head. Oh, I feel it in my chest there. Or it's always in my stomach. It's interesting. If you work with clients long enough and they're feeling pains long enough, they'll end up having a physical created illness in the area that they're having that worry, where they feel the most worried. So if it's the head, it'll be something related to the head or to the tummy. It will come out in a physical sense sooner or later.
To be honest, I heard a quote the other day. I can't say who it was from, but it essentially means the body keeps count, and sometimes you can see the stress manifests itself on somebody, on the, wrinkles and the way they are. Let's say by the time they're 45 or 50. And also, this is actually official statistic, again from the Big Mental Health Report in 2024. People with severe mental health issues in England are twice as likely to have poor physical health. And people with severe mental health issues are also 5 times more likely to die early, which means below the age of 75. This basically means that people with severe mental health issues might actually live 15 to 20 years shorter than those who don't have it.
Yeah.
Wow. That hit me like a ton of bricks when I read it last night.
Yeah. And that doesn't come too much as a surprise to me. I think I see that in the line of work that I do. which is sad.
Very sad. Because as we also said, sometimes the mental health problems that people carry from childhood are not caused by themselves. It really is a shame to find yourself suffering in life for things that you didn't do.
Mm-hmm. And then managing it in a physical way, which is sometimes activity.
Yeah.
Sometimes the work that we do, the job that we hold, all of those things are the ways that we manage that mental health issue that's there, that we're, that is causing us.
I think by far the biggest problem is the lack of friendships and genuine communities in modern day life, because people are so busy and because people are being pulled in so many different directions. Mm-hmm. Humans are ridiculously social, mm-hmm. and it's so important to be accepted, mm-hmm. that probably, if, in my opinion, the single most important thing to getting over trauma is healthy bonds with the people around you. Mm. I think if two people, hypothetically speaking, were in an accident, right? If two friends, let's say, so not related, but one of them, person A, has a very healthy relationship, and the first questions they're asked is, for example, are you safe? Is everything okay? Person B could come from a background where the first question they get asked is, how did you do it? What did you, it must be your fault. How much is it going to cost me? Do you know what I mean? A very small, brief example there, but the best way to deal with trauma is through positive experiences with the people around you. But that's not always something we have control over. Mm-hmm. You know, parents could keep helping a child who keeps bringing problems in, even at their adult life. Mm-hmm. People can stay in bad relationships. People can have horrible parents. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but do you find, okay, here's a question. Do you find that your clients that have more solid family ties and friendships, do they leave therapy quicker?
Leave therapy?
Yes, as in, is the job done quicker?
Yes.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, this is simple. One of the things that we assess as, you know, when coming into therapy, but it's definitely you do within the NHS, is what is the support mechanism for the individual that's coming in? What's your support system? We need to assess that, because the likelihood is, if they don't have a great support system around them outside that therapy session, is that we're going to see that actually improvement is going to be harder to maintain or implement. So if there's a good family structure, there are good relationships that they speak of, that for us is half the work done once therapy is finished, because you've got good relationships. So I would definitely say that there is. People who are in isolation are more likely to.
I wasn't expecting you to answer so quickly. I'm honestly shocked. So without a shadow of a doubt, the strongest correlation is your relationships outside of therapy.
Relationships outside of therapy.
Wow.
If you've got them and you've got healthy ones, they do not need to be family relationships either.
Yeah.
Because we tend to feel that, oh, I've got to have a great family around me. No, it needs to be good, healthy relationships where you feel accepted and loved.
Okay. Great segue onto a very famous experiment. So many decades ago, they tested rats in small, what they call Skinner boxes, just 3 times the size of the rats. And they gave them water and opioids, a water mixed opioid and regular water. And he found that the rats were just addicted and addicted and addicted. And anytime they got a chance, they would take that hit, right? And this created this sense that addiction is just something you're hooked on. The same researcher went on to create something called Rat Park many years on. Rat Park was a place where the rats had everything they could want. Food, water, greenery, mating, friends. And the reason the professor of psychology did it at the time, he realized, actually, you know, rats are very social creatures. Rats are incredibly social creatures. So the idea was to see if the addiction remains if we give these rats everything. They noticed that when in Rat Park, hardly any of the rats actually chose to go near the opioid water. So they were not experiencing the same level of addiction as the rats in the isolated boxes. Then they took the experiment a step further. They took another group of rats and kept them in these Skinner boxes for 57 days to make sure they were perfectly as addicted as they could be. And then he put them in Rat Park. And once again, they found they hardly went near the opioid water. The conclusion came that the addiction is a fix and a replacement for a need. And if you are just kept in a box and you cannot be social, have love, have food, or have your basic needs, you will go to something that absolves you from that need. But when you have everything, then addiction is almost a myth. Now, what do you think of that?
I don't often. I read research. I guess my thoughts in relation to it, I would align with much of that, in the sense of, if we lived in a world where people had access to food, shelter, and their basic needs, and it was also even, in the sense of, we didn't really have rich and poor, we just had people who were able to provide with all their needs, I think that we would have a world where people didn't have a need for addiction. There would be a sense of a balance. So we wouldn't crave those things. We wouldn't crave anything in particular. I think the fact that we live in a world where actually there are rich and there are poor, and we are all seeking to be the rich in order to survive the society. And when we're not feeling that we're getting there, that we try to find something that fixes that for us, that stops us thinking about that, that manages, which could become an addiction, then that's what I think is happening. So I think that sort of research seemed to evidence that same thing, is that actually...
Well, you touched on something really important there. What the research gave was the rats everything in abundance. That's one flaw of the experiment that could be made. But also, even if we take some of that rich and relative poverty aside, let's say, it's also argued by many people, even like Dr. Gabor Mate, that because the addiction is replacing something, a healthy love life, family life, a job you enjoy could be one less reason to take heroin. And I think it goes back to ultimately what we're here to discuss today, mental health. If your mental health is stable and the forces around it are reinforcing in a positive manner, then addiction is less needed.
Yeah. Well, because I know that one of the things that they say about the music industry is that actually there's a lot of addiction within that. Yeah. And often the more successful you are, the greater the problem could be. You know, we've seen many great artists, end their lives through drug addiction. So I guess it's also about environment and how much of that. We also know that within the music industry, there's easy access to that as well. It becomes easier accessible.
Yeah.
So for me, I do take all the things that you said on board and feel that there's evidence of that. But I do feel our environments, which is what the research is based on, creating the environment that is healthy. It doesn't necessarily, I guess, mean that what I'm saying is if you remove poverty, then you remove the need for addiction, because then why?
No, of course not.
Yeah, it's
one less problem.
It's one less problem. If you remove, I guess, the issues of craving, whatever that is, and you often it's wealth, then obviously I feel that a human being is going to feel more balanced in general.
No, I 100% agree with that. And there is no easy answer, otherwise we would have it by now.
Yeah. But
again, it just goes back to how important it is to have a healthy environment. It's much easier to say than to actually implement. But there's probably nothing better for you, because as I always say, and I think I say every episode, success breeds success, right? And that could be in mental health wise as well. You could be amongst very highly successful people who are overly stressed and anxious, or you could be living in a very comfortable space with happy people, happy people whose goals are larger than them or larger than anything momentary. The music industry, again, is an example of how you could pretty much have everything you want in life, and yet it might not be enough.
That's right.
Right? And some people, I know that a lot of people criticize famous people who do these things and say, well, what more could you have wanted? I would argue back and say it's not what they wanted. It's what their mind needed. And if you are lacking the basic fundamental basics, no amount of money can make up for that. It's very interesting whenever you see these heartwarming Instagram posts and they interview old people. They all say things like, take care of your friends, be there for your loved ones, don't work too much.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. People realize that stuff very late. I don't know why.
I guess life is a matter of lessons, isn't it? We are learning as we go on. You don't stop learning, and I guess there are a lot of things that you learn the longer the experience of life.
It never gets easier. I think I might have mentioned this to you many months ago. No one told me adulting would be this annoying. I just want to record podcasts, but I have to live an adult life and work as an architect. But I could certainly have worse problems. Any final points before we move on? Or before we finish, actually, I think that might be a great way to round it off.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that you were saying throughout this is that, what's your answer to this? What's the answer to this?
Yeah.
And as you repeated that question, I kept thinking, what? None of us have the answer. None of us as human beings have the answer. We are exploring this life, seeking to find the answer to so many of our own personal experiences and our own journey. And I think I've come to terms with the fact that, as a human being, I do not have, the answer to anybody's problems or situations. If I did, I would definitely.
You'd be a billionaire.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose when I was saying what's the answer, it's not every day I get to sit with someone who has 15 to 20 years of experience in your industry. That's what I meant. Because you're right, these things are vague. And funnily enough, even though many of us have very similar issues, we're all just as confused.
Yeah.
So maybe the only answer is to just sincerely try your best.
Yes, to really do your best and to bring your experience. Because this is my experience. And someone else can learn from that, can learn a lot from my experience if I share it. It can make your life a little bit easier possibly. So I really don't necessarily feel I bring the answer, but I do bring my experience, and I hope that my experience will enrich somebody else. And that's why, I bring those experiences and talk through these things. And they're my experiences. I don't expect you to agree with them or feel that they're right or wrong. They're my experiences, and I value them. And I really do believe that they can help others. Other people's experiences have helped me. So, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity for today.
You're more than welcome. And can I just say, it's very important that, like Ian, we all actually value the things that we do and bring to the table. Because I certainly didn't always value everything I did. Because I always wanted to achieve more and more. And sometimes it is important to just value what it is that you do. So then you can at least pass it on in a positive manner, which is what you're doing. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Like, subscribe, all the usual, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.